Okay, so welcome to another seasonal SQL Trail seasonal series. It's always good to have you, compañeros. So I'd like to introduce my co-host for today's session, Mr. Jason Jenkins.
Hello. Hopefully you can hear me pretty well. Yes, my name is Jason Jenkins. Technical analyst here at SQL Data Partners. Mentioned before, I love food, love a good burrito. Exploring and learning, and hopefully today I can share some good insight.
Awesome, very good. Our session today concentrates on forms of monitoring. So some of these are going to be in SQL Server Management Studio. However, we're also going to introduce you to some PowerShell. Now, don't worry. Again, this is all just very introductory, but we hope that you'll feel confident that what we go over will be very approachable to you. I think one of the challenges with monitoring is that monitoring helps you get to the next step, but we won't necessarily get all, from A to Z, if you will, right? We're going to go from, how do I get A, or where is B? Monitoring is going to give me information that I can then decide what is the next step, right? So we are looking at ways to collect or ways to get access to that information today. So we are going to start with a topic we mentioned last time, and that is extended events. Okay, so again, we are going to start in Management Studio, and extended events is the baked-in Microsoft lightweight performance monitoring system that enables users to collect data needed to monitor and troubleshoot problems in SQL Server. That's a mouthful. So that's the Microsoft line, and what we wanted to do was to introduce it, talk about some of the ways that it could be used, and then go from there. Now, as we talk about monitoring, we need to throw up some caution, right? Monitoring increases the overhead of the system. It's not free. It will compete with resources just like the applications that you run. So our suggestion is to monitor in chunks, or at least to be aware of what you are, start slow, right? And increase as needed. So you turn the monitoring on, try to replicate the issue, turn it off. We are generally going to discourage longer-term use of monitoring, again, until you have a better feel for the monitoring tools and how your system will react. So anytime you implement something, you just want to know how to turn it off, right? So again, we get it. It's easy. All of our stuff today comes from test environments. It's manufactured, if you will, and we don't have to worry about getting tickets, right, for the overhead that we create. So again, I think it's useful. It's there's tooling, but again, be forewarned. So, Jason, I think we've warned them. So I think we're good to go now, right? Okay, so now let's get into extended events. So in Management Studio, I've connected here to a SQL Server already. I'm going to expand management. There I'll see extended events, and I can also expand extended events. I'll see sessions. I can expand those, and I will see some default sessions that Microsoft has created for me. Everyone's going to get a system health session once you are in SQL Server 2012 and further. You're going to get this system health. This session collects high-level stats, snapshots, if you will, every 5 minutes. So there's a limit on the number of records it will create. Most systems we see are limited to just a couple of days. A very busy system might only contain 1 day. So it moves through the data pretty quickly. The system health session is not going to collect details on the queries running in your system. So the individual, selects or store procedures that you might be looking for. but it will collect some deadlock information. And so we peeked at those quickly in the last session. We'd like to go ahead and do that again. So if we expand the session, we right-click on the event file and choose View Target Data. This is going to bring up a grid view that's not super friendly. You'll also notice that as I click into one of those lines, those records there, more detail will appear at the second grid underneath, and that data is in XML format. So this is one of the challenges in working with extended events, is that you're parsing through XML. Now, again, our focus here is we want to take a peek at the deadlocks that are there. So, okay, so the filter button is going to bring up an action, and it's going to allow us to limit to the series of time if we want. In our case, however, we're just going to add a clause. We're going to choose name from the field dropdown. Our operator will be contains, and the value we're putting in is going to be dead for deadlock. So basically, I am searching for all of the names that have dead in the name. So if I click OK here, I've now filtered on the results, and I'm only seeing the deadlock information. I can click on the results. Now down below, I'm going to see a deadlock tab, and I can see what was involved in that deadlock example. So as we filter over, we can hover over each of those circles, and it will give us the statement that was involved. Now, fixing those are beyond the scope of this session, but hopefully this information allows you to move on to the next step, because at least now you have some starting place. And if you get stuck, right, just call us, we'll help. Now, perhaps you want to see the actual queries that a user is running. Now we can do that, and but to do that, we're going to create a custom session. So let's show you how to do that. So we've closed out of that, and we are going to start by right-clicking and doing new, right-clicking extended events and doing new session. Now, we want to be as specific as we can. We kind of threw that out in the caveat in the beginning. So we're going to avoid the wizard for now, because again, we want to start small and then add. Let's understand what we're doing, and then we can add a little bit later. Obviously, if we're in development, we can be a little bit more cavalier, but again, we're trying to be good examples here. So our session name is going to be Seasonal Series, and once we put in the name, we can now click on the events page. So in the event library, in the drop-down list on the right, you should have event names only. Ours is already set there by default, but you may need to change that. In the text box, we're going to type SQL, because we want to see the SQL commands that get run. And so we are looking for the SQL statement completed library. So we're going to click the caret. Now it's over in the selected events. And so with that, it's bringing over fields that it's going to collect as a result here. So now we're ready to click the configure button on the far right. So the SQL statement completed has a couple of pieces or columns, if you will, that it collects. I like to add username. In this case, we want to see what a specific user is running. So here in the global fields, we're going to select username. And now we're ready to add filter. So what is it? What's the criteria for what queries are going to make it into our session? Okay. In this case, we want to limit it to a user. So if we go into the field and do the drop down, we can scroll down to the SQL Server section, and you'll see there are a number of different options. I could choose the database name. I could choose, even if like the SQL text, for example, if I knew that my store procedure included this specific information, I could search for just that. Let's go ahead and yeah, maximize that. There we go. So you can see a couple of different pieces. If there was a specific ID that was getting you, again, database, what have you. In our case, we're going to choose SQL Server Session NT User. Okay, our operator is going to be like iSQL. And again, this just gives us the most flexibility. So we are doing a like rather than an equals. And then in our value, we are looking for the user that is like, and in our case, we're going to do admin. Now, when we put this in, we're going to put percent signs on either side to show that it's a wildcard. And again, we're trying to be as specific as we can, going after a user, and sometimes your application users, you're still going to be capturing a lot of information. So this may not be quite as specific enough, but it is a way to start, right? Okay, so now that we have that, we are ready to click on the data storage tab. In the target area, we're going to click add a target, and we're going to choose event file. So we are just saving this information to a file. It's going to get persisted. That way, SQL Server restarts, we still have this information available to us. Now, the default is 1 GB here. You may want to change that depending on your system, right? Particularly if you've installed things on the C drive, depending on what your space is, you may want to cut that in half. It will also enable rollovers, right? In our case, the maximum we could get is 5 GB of data. And then what will happen is it will just start carving out or pushing out the old data. Okay, so from there, we are now ready to click on advanced. Okay, so again, we are trying to limit the impact of the monitoring. So one of the things that we're going to do here is we're going to change the event retention mode to multiple event loss. So in the event that the SQL Server gets overwhelmed, it's more worried about serving up the queries that the applications are requesting rather than trying to collect information for us. We're going to change the maximum dispatch latency from 30 down to 15 seconds. And with that, we're ready to click OK. So our session is created, but you'll see it has the red icon. It's in a stop state. So we're going to go ahead and start that guy. And now we start collecting information, right? So extended events is first going to assign a little bit of memory to that. Not very much. We're talking about megabytes here, right? It's not kilobytes even. It's not a lot of information. And then it's going to get pushed into that file that we created. So now, Jason, let's go ahead and run a query here, so we can see what we captured, and that's the one we're going to run. Okay, and so now we want to start taking a peek and saying, okay, what else is getting run over here? So if we expand our session, we'll see the event file, and we are ready to select from it. So view target data. There we go. Okay, we have skipped ahead a little bit, and we have a couple of additional columns. So normally when you open this, you're going to see name and timestamp, right? So if you click there are multiple ways to add columns to this list. One, you can right-click the header up on the top, or down below. If you click into the details there, you can right-click and then add the row there. Okay, so now I have information. You can see that all of my users are with the report builder admin, SQL admin account. And now my investigation can begin. So what we can do here is now we have access to the only queries that were run by this admin user. We have the statements, and we have the duration. So I might want to take a peek, and let me just filter or sort rather by duration. And I can see, okay, well, which queries are taking the longest? Now, those numbers are pretty big. You can see right there in microseconds. So those numbers are going to get pretty large. But there in row 3, you can see our SP-Who2. So it's capturing what is getting run. Again, on a busy system, right? Big application system, you may cycle through some of that, and you don't want to keep a lot of it. So anything we can do to trim that is going to be helpful. So what we've done here is we've showed how to use the system health to peek in there. Again, it's going to have snapshots of information. We queried it on deadlocks. We also created another session with a specific user to capture completed queries by that user. And so we hope that this has been a helpful introduction to the topic of extended events and something that you can use to start building on.
So I guess I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit now about the DBA tools, the use and whatnot. So basically, whether you're a database administrator, SQL developer, or just a guy in your company who got stuck.
You mean blessed, I think. You mean blessed, Jason.
Or blessed working in SQL Server. DBA tools are available to help you out. Now, what are DBA tools? DBA tools is a set of PowerShell commands you can use to administer and monitor your database. For those of you who do not want to work in SQL Server Management Studio all the time, this is me, this can actually be a wonderful way to get around that. So their website is dbatools.io, filled with powerful or PowerShell, and they're powerful as well, commands to help you complete long or repetitive tasks faster and with fewer errors. So why would you use DBA tools? Let us think about this in a unique way. Would you wash your clothes by hand? And the answer is no. So when it comes to performing migrations or simply copying information such as mail or logins on over to a new instance, DBA tools can save lots of time. So the setup is quite simple. Clicking on the Windows tab, you can go ahead and pull up a search, type in Windows PowerShell or just PowerShell, and that should pull up the icon. Preferably, we would like to run or do a right click on the icon and run this as an administrator. So if you have not already installed DBA tools, you can simply type in the command install -module space DBA tools and answer yes to installing a couple of required utilities. Probably just put the letter Y. And then once this is installed, which I believe is relatively quick, it only takes a few minutes, you'll be ready to start using commands from DBA tools. And then apart from that, as I said, on the website, you can find a whole list of commands for all your DBA needs. So if you're having some issues, we'll discuss a few troubleshooting steps later on. But if you are new to using PowerShell, it might be helpful to quickly, introduce the syntax portion. Commands are given in a verb-noun format. So, for example, even with installing or install module of the DBA tools, the commands will be in the color yellow. Parameters use a dash and turn gray. Text can be either white or dark blue, and that's included in single quotes. And as you continue to use DBA tools, you'll see variables have a $sign, usually turn yellow. So maybe if you think something's off with your colors, you might actually have something wrong with your script or your syntax. So I guess let us start off by doing a little bit of exploring. Let us just say we might have to perform a migration. Some of the tasks might be moving over DBA mail, logins, or even linked servers. A few of these scripts I'd be able to use to accomplish these goals would be copy DBA mail, copy DBA login, and copy DBA linked servers. So the syntax for these commands is explained and shown in every viable way on the website. For example, if I had two instances with one called SQL Server 2014A and the second called SQL Cluster, which is the example they use on the website, and I wanted to copy the database mail from the first instance to the second instance, my syntax would appear in the following way. Copy -DBA DB mail have a space, then hyphen source. And that source would be the SQL Server 2014A. There's be a space between that, another hyphen, destination, and then add space, and then within destination, server, which would be SQL cluster in this case. You should be able to see that on the screen as well. This example would go ahead and bring over all the logins from the SQL Server 2014A to the SQL cluster. It would save me lots of time. The sequence will start off with a command that we want to use and then follow up with a source instance and a destination instance. So this makes using DBA Tools easy and simple. So now to kind of gears, I guess, into a slight demo. As a DBA and working with multiple clients and multiple servers, I tend to be busy. So one of the most important responsibilities I must ensure is that my clients' instances are taking successful full backups, differential backups, and log backups. I have the help of a monitoring service, which we'll discuss later, and the ability to create email alerts from SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS. However, I prefer to be a little proactive and check up on these backups, especially the full backups. When they take place, I go ahead and right-click. So I could go ahead and right-click on the backup jobs inside of Management Studio and see if they ran successfully. But just imagine doing this for more than 50 different instances and between different clients. This could take me all day. So thankfully to PowerShell and DBA Tools, I can check the backup history, all the servers at one time. So, and I can show on the screen in a simple example that using the get backup history command along with my server's name, I can see the backup history. And so this one command gives me the backup history, which I could get in SSMS, but I'd have to go into each database to get it. And you can imagine there's multiple databases on a server. That's, like I said, it takes some time. So we can extend from there. We can add some date logic to make sure our backups have happened in the last 30 days or filter our databases. We'll not go into the complexity of writing the logic here, but we thought it would be helpful to show a starting place and discuss what is possible. Another neat feature that we can show on the screen is the amount of disk space using the DBA commands to get that disk space. So using the command spelled out, get -DBA space -SQL instance. In this case, we're going to use report builder / usually the default instance name. This will actually go ahead and pull up the disk space for us. Now, this can, of course, be trimmed down, but for demonstration purposes, this provides great insight on how powerful DBA Tools can really be. We now see the used and free space inside each of the databases on the server. There can be too much data sometimes, so I guess let's add a parameter to return only a specific database. So I can easily just go up. I can click on the up arrow and add my new parameter, database. So it'd be -database. And this time I think we're going to use the database learn SQL. And this should, I believe, bring up about 3 in here. Example,
so got 2, Jason.
2.
So
Even better.
the
See it all on the screen. Yeah, so that's perfect. So we can go ahead and see this, and this kind of shows like how powerful it really is. No, so I guess maybe discuss a few common mistakes or errors before we get to questions. So I guess like all technology, sometimes using PowerShell along with DBA Tools could produce a few errors, and I've come across these before. Because the best tips are making sure that your commands are up to date. So make sure, I guess, DBA Tools is up to date, that module. Make sure you check your spelling. A lot of times it's just that simple syntax or spelling error that will cause you to rethink your career. Or maybe even a permissions issue. So if you're on one server but you're trying to connect to another, make sure that that server has permission to connect on over. Which maybe you can try to do as like a simple remote desktop on over, whatnot. And at least for me, these have been the majority of issues that have caused me nightmares. Not too much. I'd still rather use PowerShell any day than do stuff manually. And I guess from there are a lot of other commands to help you choose and get started. And I guess hopefully this will help you get started as well.
Yeah, one of the cool things about this is the ability to start automating, right, some of these pieces, and so PowerShell does make it super. It makes it much more approachable. Well, it makes it possible. DBA Tools then makes it more approachable because they have packed in a whole lot of functionality in that little command, right? So that they have taken some of the legwork out of it, so that it becomes much more approachable to you and to me.
I guess I'd be interested if anyone else has any other way to automate something or done something else. I'd definitely be interested in hear about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so far for us, PowerShell has been the best case.
Yes, I don't know if Dan's on here today, but we introduced him. One of our customers introduced him to some PowerShell and migrating databases, and then he took that and made it, expanded on it, right? In terms of, well, hey, I have a service that needs to stop before I restore my databases, for example, right? So let me add some functionality there to do that. So again, you can get pretty complicated pretty quickly, but hopefully this is, this introduction is a little bit approachable, right? Because it's here's my command, and then here's where I need it to run. And like we mentioned, they have pretty good examples on the website. Okay, so for my next trick, I am going to kick off these queries here. And we want to talk a little bit about SP who is active. Okay, so another way to collect data is through a script that our friend Adam Mechanic has written, a very nice guy. And we're going to encourage you to get his query from his website, whoisactive.com. Now, don't be as concerned as Jason. You go to this website and you're like, man, this looks a little sketchy.
And I was like, I trust this one. Very safe query on a very sketchy looking website.
That's right. Very safe query. So you can download that, and you're going to end up with a script that is many thousands of lines long. Okay. And by default, it's going to go into the master database. So we can run that, and it's going to create a stored procedure. So with extended events, right, we are setting that up. We kind of wanted that to run, and it's going to collect everything. If I was run, it's just, this insatiable, right, file. It just wants to keep adding and adding and adding. Well, sometimes I may only want to look at what's actually happening right now. Okay. And so once I've run that, I can take the name of the procedure, right? And I'm opening up a new window, and I can run this, and it's going to give me a snapshot of what's running in my system at this moment. Okay. And now we have overwhelmed the system, and it's taking a little bit longer than we would like to return the result, but it's going to give me what is happening with my system right now. Eventually. I may have to stop one of these. Okay, here we go. So you can tell when your server is really busy or it's struggling if SP is active takes a little while. So we may be pushing this one a little bit to the hilt. So we have these queries, and these queries, as the name implies, who is active, they are actually running right now. Okay, and so just because I don't want to wait another 30 minutes, I'm gonna, or 30 seconds rather, I'm gonna go ahead and kick that over here and let that run, and I can start to see information about what's happening. Again, a snapshot. As soon as it stops running, my information will have changed. So the longer that we go, the more out of date my information is, right? So now you can go over here. I guess in this case, we were still selecting from users, right? But you can see that we went from 10 to actually 15 rows of information. Now, some of the interesting pieces here that we collect is how long has this session been running? Okay, 2 minutes, 1 minute, right? Seconds, sub-second. Okay. I also get the text. So what is the actual command that is running against the server? Who's running it? And then I start to get some monitoring or some metrics around the queries. And depending on what it is that I'm trying to do, I may be interested in, one or more of these columns at any given time. I can also see that there's a percent complete, which you'll notice only includes the backup, right? So backup and sometimes the index rebuilds will have that information, right? The other queries like the selects and the store procedures won't have any information on how long it will take to complete. If I could figure out that problem, I would make a lot of money because everybody wants to know when their query is going to be done. It will tell me which database it's connecting from, right? What the program name is, and then again what the start time was. So this is hey, I kind of want to see what's going on. I got a ticket like, hey, things are slow. I will pull this up kind of first thing and just be like, okay, well, hey, what's going on here? And what changes over time? So one of the things, oh, look at that. We even got one here. So one of the things that we'll take a peek at is blocking sessions. So in this case, session number 111, and I'm going to zoom in on this just for a little bit. Let's make sure you guys can see this. Oops. There we go. So session 111 is actually blocked. And of course, now it's too big to be able to see the whole thing. Can I move over? Is blocked by session 120, meaning I need session 120 to finish up, to hurry up and finish before this session, session 111 can complete. So then I'm like, okay, well, what's session 111 or excuse me, 120 doing? Right. So these might be questions that I start asking as I look into the system. Yeah, the suspense is killing me. Luther, oh, always a pleasure to have you, sir. Yes, so you just never know what nuggets of information you're going to get when you get this information back. Oops, okay, let me get out of here. So again, right, so you can sit here and you'll run this, but the downside is that you have to be running it. It's going to change. And you may not want to sit here for very long and run this. There's also the situation where they'll come to you and they'll say, well, hey, I had a situation, this morning. And you're like, well, that doesn't really help me now, right? I can't go back in time and get that. Now there are things like extended events there, right? That you could go and try to get some of that information out. This is perhaps another way. Now, one of the things that we have looked at is, okay, I would like to just, again, occasionally get information about what's running on the system from time to time. So we had a customer in California reach out to us and they said, hey, I'm having trouble with my SQL Server. And for whatever reason, right, they didn't want us to take a look at it. They're going to have somebody else tune it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So they had that person take a look at the system, right? Several weeks later, he calls me back and he says, hey, I'm still having problems. I said, they've looked at the system, all the settings are correct, right? Everything is good, but something's just not quite right. And I'm like, well, how do I find out what's wrong if you won't let me look at the system? And I thought, you know what? Let me give you this. And we created a wrapper around it to create a job that would regularly run, save the results from the SP who is active into a table, and then allow you to look at it later. So for example, and I guess I should have done this. Okay, well, let me copy this just. So now if I run both of these, we will get the results of the SP who is active, and we can also see this job that gets running. So I guess I can take a look, SQL data check. For right now, right, we have it running every 15 minutes. So all it does is it will run, and man, we really did a number on this. It will run, grab the contents and stick it into that table. So then you can go back at your leisure and take a peek and say, okay, well, what is in that? What is in that table? Okay, so now I've been collecting this information. Okay, and I might want to do something like, again, here I only have 40 rows. We're trying to be again, good stewards. We don't want to be collecting hordes and hordes of information, but we want to order by SQL underscore text. So at least, oh, that's right, because it's XML. Oh, brother. That was embarrassing. So I'll have to think of another way to do that. I suppose you could look at session ID. But I may just want to take a peek and be like, hey, what am I seeing a lot of in here? And how long is it taking? So going back to this customer from California, they started running this. The first couple of hours, he'd actually query the table. And I'm like, hey, do you have anything yet? He's like, I got nothing. And then the next day he calls and he's like, bingo, we got it. There was a report, right, that shouldn't be run all the time, that individual users were somewhat randomly, and multiple people in the office were running this report and causing issues. And so this helped us to identify that long-running query was kind of taking up resources with a low touch, right? And so we would like to make this available to you. We'd like to pass this along. And so admittedly, we are just finishing up the script to make that available, but it will, because you're registered, we will get you the link for how to download that. Now, it will be in 2 steps, right? So one, you're going to have to go out, and because it is separate, you have to go out and download the who is active, right? Again, Adam's a nice guy from the Northeast in the Boston area. You'll download that, you'll run it. We are looking at it being in the master database, and that may be something we have to change in our script or make that configurable. So that way the table gets created, the job gets created, and it will start collecting information so that you can then take a peek and be like, well, hey, what's running in here? And is there anything that kind of jumps out to me in terms of being running super often, which can be dangerous because there are things like, again, so Dan's on the call here today. His ERP, they have these little checks that constantly run, every couple of seconds, it feels like, right? It's like, hey, is there any activity? So that's not necessarily a good or always the best indicator, but it is a indicator, particularly for the stuff that is running for a long time, right? If I have something that just jumps out to me as, hey, I didn't know about that, right? And it's taking a long time. That may be something that I want to investigate a little bit. So again, you also notice that between, I guess what I wanted to show here, this one finish? Yeah, it did. Is we have just a bit more information. So by default, and this is configurable, you can add with parameters, you can get all of this information. But we've added up just a few more details into the table to help with the troubleshooting piece. And so, yeah, we think that the SP who is active is another way to make monitoring approachable. It's not necessarily going to tell you what to do, but hopefully it gets you to the next step, or at least gives you information that you perhaps didn't have before. Okay, so the last piece that we want to talk about. So admittedly, while these pieces that we've discussed are helpful in understanding more about the system, the reality is if we want to be serious about monitoring, and is that the right phrase? I was going to say we waved the white flag, but we want to be in the database administration business and not necessarily in the writing all the scripts to monitor the database. There are some folks that have done an amazing job at that. And so you may want to look at using a third-party monitoring software. So for example, this is the SolarWinds dashboard, right? So the SolarWinds dashboard is going to collect a variety of different information. A lot of the pieces that we talked about today. So for example, you can see in here, I can look at my deadlocks. Let's see, do I need to stop those scripts? Let me go ahead and stop these guys. Cut down some of this this noise. Let's see if that helps us.
Yeah, we really put a hit on with all this.
Yeah, yes, we did. We loaded it up today. We wanted something special. Okay, here we go. So here you can see where it was hanging just a little bit. So it's going to collect this information for us, right? So one of the things we can then do is we can take a look at weights or CPU utilization. Oh yeah, we tapped out the CPU there for a little while. So I can go in and I want to jump to the top SQL. Hey, what was this collecting here? I can even see that there was a timeout, right? Hey, and some of these pieces, I just want to take a look at the CPU, and it looks like what I had set up for my SP who is active, right, was chewing up some CPU, as well as even just the SolarWinds, as we had just installed this today. It looks like it was still trying to do some of the setup pieces here for us. But it's going to collect, things like the deadlocks, right? The blocking session that we saw, and I guess we don't have quite enough time. Where was that blocking session that we saw?
It could have also been off too at the moment when that.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we didn't quite get that. Okay. But now it also provides some additional history. Now, right? Hey, Carlos, what about the whole monitoring piece and starting slow? It's not to say that this is a silver bullet, and we have seen it cause issues, right? So this is something that you're going to have to introduce and understand into your system. However, it does provide. It is very complete. They do a good job of trying to make it as low profile as possible. Again, not that it's perfect, but in terms of what you get for the hits that you're going to take, right? It's a reasonable risk, if you will, for us. Okay, so Neil asks, this is the SQL Sentry product. So SolarWinds does now have two products, DPA, the Database Performance Analyzer, and then SQL Sentry. So we were, well, I guess there's no history, but we have kind of gravitated towards the Sentry one, or the SQL Sentry tool.
And I guess another piece to add to that too is that anytime we've had like a small issue, I mean, we just reach right out to SolarWinds, they respond relatively quickly, or get on like a live call or whatnot, and we can resolve an issue if we have it. But for the majority of the time, we never really have issues at all.
Yep. Okay, so again, right, another introduction into, right, so some monitoring. So today we've talked about a couple of things. We've talked about extended events. We've talked about PowerShell, really DBA tools, right? We didn't do that much PowerShell. We really just did their commands. We've talked about the SP who is active, and then we've talked about the monitoring. So I should say, so SQL here at SQL Data Partners, we are a SolarWinds partner and can provide good pricing, right, for the SQL Sentry product. So if that's something that you'd like to look at and you'd like to consider, we'd be happy to help you out, get a trial, and see what it can do for your environment. Okay, with that, thanks everybody. We do appreciate it.
SQL Data Partners.